So last but not least, we're going to talk about auditioning and chair placements in orchestra, which we know can be sometimes a hot button issue, but I'm going to give you some strategies I think work really well in the school orchestra setting. So auditions, many students hear the word audition and they freak out, right? I didn't like auditions as a kid. As an adult, I don't like auditions. So I find that for a lot of students, if they hear the word audition or they think they have to audition for something, that may be what causes a student to quit. So I think you use the word audition sparingly. There's lots of ways to know how to place students without using the word audition. So use the word sparingly and use it carefully. Anytime you're going to hold auditions, select excerpts that are realistic for your program and your students. So, for example, if you are auditioning students for high school orchestra, but your top orchestra is a level 4, then don't hand out level 6 excerpts. You want your excerpts to match what you're playing in your classes. Oftentimes, we'll pick an excerpt that is something we've just played that year for those groups, or something we've done the last few years that I've really enjoyed is we'll pick an excerpt from either a Suzuki book or a simple, or like a solo book, and let that be an excerpt, because then they've learned a little piece while getting ready for an audition. So put all the information on one form. If there's a scale they need to know, if there's going to be sight reading, what the date of the audition is, and then the excerpt, put it all on one sheet of paper. That way they only have to keep up with one thing. Make sure you put the music out in advance. Now, if the audition is in May, you don't want to give out the music in November, right? That's like huge. But figure out what's an appropriate amount of audition length for them to have the music and get it out in time. I think it's really helpful if you can make sure that the title of the selection is on the music, because then students can go and listen. And if you can even provide links for some exemplars of what it should sound like for students, I think that's really helpful. So for example, the Bach A minor is our next to top orchestra's one of the violin audition pieces. And so, having that listed there so students can go out to YouTube, or I can post some links and they can go here, what should this sound like? That's a way for them to copy the articulation, to hear proper articulation, to hear the proper intonation. And again, just see if they're on the right track, maybe get a good idea of tempo. So if you can post links that you think sound good version, then that will help students really have an exemplar to model themselves after. Be really clear with what is expected. If you expect students to play a 3-octave scale, it needs to be written on the form. If you expect them to play the arpeggio, put the arpeggio. Sometimes students, if we write, students will play a 3-octave G major scale and we don't write the word arpeggio, they don't learn the arpeggio. So please be very clear with your expectations and what you want them to perform. And then finally, provide the rubric ahead of time for an audition. Students want to know what they're being graded on. We all like to know what the expectations are, and it just takes away that mystical, what are they listening for? In general, even with our incoming 9th graders, we don't listen to every single 8th grader. We only listen to the ones that want to audition for our top 2 orchestras. So we have students that don't ever audition for us the whole time they're in school, and that is just fine. They play playing test, they do other things, but they don't have to audition, and that is just fine by me, because if that means that keeps that kid from losing his cookies and freaking out, then I think that's a great way to keep that kid engaged in orchestra class. So, I think auditions are important for some kids. For other kids, it's a real turnoff. So you have to kind of balance that in your program and know your community. So seating and chair placements is also in the same realm. I've taught a long time now. I'm getting kind of ancient. And so I've tried all kinds of different things, as I'm sure many of you have. But whatever you're doing, you need seating charts. That's the first thing. And every class needs a clear seating chart posted. You can make templates online. I'll show you some places you can get some templates online. You can make your own seating chart. I'll show you what we use. But make sure you have a clear seating plan posted in your classroom where students can see it, because oftentimes even over the weekend, sometimes they forget where they sit. It's a very strange phenomenon that happens. And especially if you rotate seating a lot, it's really helpful if kids know exactly where they're sitting. I think it's really important you as the teacher decide how competitive you want your classroom and your students to be. This is a very personal philosophy issue in my mind. I have my own philosophy. You may have yours. For me, I'll tell you, me personally, I feel like students have many opportunities to compete in the orchestral world. We have so many auditioned ensembles, especially if you live in the metro Atlanta area. But even if you're, further outside the metro area, you still have some youth orchestras. You have all-state orchestra. We have GHP. There are many opportunities that exist for students to compete. So for my personal program culture, I've really chosen to work towards not having them compete with one another, but work as a family and a team. And if they want to be really competitive, then they can go outside the orchestra and compete outside the orchestra. Really, I want them to compete with just themselves. I'm competing with myself to be the best player I can be. But again, every school is different. My school environment is very much that way. My school is not a very competitive environment. It's a very warm environment, a very engaging environment. It's a very team driven and student leader based environment. So that has to match your program culture. So if your program culture is, different than that, that is what works at your school. There are many schools where the academic rigor is the focus. And so maybe a more competitive seating model works better in your environment. We did some pretty competitive seating at one time at my school. It really yielded a lot of drama, is what we experienced. And anytime we've done it, it's yielded more drama than good results. So for us, it's worked better to rotate seating and to move seating around often and to just make it so that everybody kind of moves. Also, the kids already know who the best players are, I think, and so they don't really need a seating chair placement thing to know that. I would consider rotating your violin sections even within the same concert. So we balance our first and violin sections at my school so that they're even, and then we rotate them even in the same concert. So we'll play the first piece, and then the violin sections will stand up and swap, second piece, and then they'll swap. So we do a lot of switching on stage. The kids are really good at it now. They know the procedure. They move clockwise. It works great. And the nice thing is then we'll always laugh about this, but we always will get a kid that will move from somewhere and we'll say, hey, what instrument do you play? And they'll say, second violin. It's like, that's not an instrument. That's the instrument part. You play violin. And so it gets rid of that. It gets rid of kids that never get to read on the E string or never get to read on the G string. And it gets them used to playing both the violin parts. So we do rotate seating often. We do a lot of strong, weak pairing. So a strong player with a weaker player, or a strong stand and another strong stand, and then a weak stand in between. So kind of making a sandwich. So we do some different things to create some stronger, weaker pairings and try to build that weaker player up a little bit. You can rotate by stand each day. You can rotate each week. You can rotate by the outside. You can rotate. There's all kinds of rotation things that you can do. There's lots of great ideas online. We have numbered notebooks, so we just move the notebooks back one and then we've rotated. So a lot of different choices you can do to rotate your seating, but I would really recommend rotating your seating. Sometimes it can be frightening when that last stand comes to the front, but those players get a different experience. It's a lot easier to play up front than in the far back. And so also your better players get that experience of what it's like to sit in the back. So rotation is really good. And then, obviously I would say, as you're going along, you can figure out how far out from the concert you want to set the final seating. I would say 2 weeks before is kind of the minimum. You need to make sure by 2 weeks before you're there. You may also have to make seating considerations based on behavior. We call them the gruesome twosomes, who you need to split up. Or you may have two kids that just work really well together. We had these girls in the viola section that were stand partners since 6th grade all the way to 12th grade. And it was like a thing. But they just worked really well together and they behaved well together. There are students with IEPs and 504s that may need accommodations to be closer to the door, or they may need to be closer to the bathroom or closer to you. So you may have to make considerations based on that as well. There is that school of thought about challenging chairs, and our experience with chair challenges at my school has been that it just made a lot of work for the teacher, and then they were just arguing over the same chair. It's just so much work and not really healthy. They just annoyed each other. And so for me, it's not really valuable in my situation, but it may work well for you. If chair challenges are something that you're passionate about, I think that's great. You do you. But I would make sure you have a really clear plan in place. And also, I would not let it happen every week. It's really disruptive to your program and to the flow of the day and the flow of the seating. And then they're just always trying to one up each other. So kind of figure out how often you want to deal with that. So at the bottom there's a couple of websites. This bgreco.net /band. That's an online seating chart where you can go in and create your seating chart. You put in the number of seats you need. It'll make the arcs, little boxes. You can even type in the kids' names. Really cool. If you go to orchestrateacher.blogspot.com, that's a free website. If you haven't used that, amazing. So many good pieces of information on her website. But she has a really cool thing where she takes the names of students and puts them in Excel and then just does an Excel randomizer, and it randomly sorts each section. She has instructions for that. So I think that's Angela Harmon's website. So I think that's a great way if you want to make it really random to try. I tried that one year. It was pretty cool. Definitely was a fruit basket turnover every time we did seating. So that's another way you can do it. So just some options there where you can find some seating charts. Okay, and here is what I use. So I made this in an ancient program. This is from Microsoft Publisher. And so this works with the layout of my classroom. I print this out, and then we handwrite in the kids' names because it's quicker for us at my school because we're a little older. But I know how many chairs are on each row. I know how many are, I can see the sections clearly delimited. I've got the basses back there, and you can see we put our cellos in a little different place, but this works really well. We use our violins sit antiphonally. So this is helpful for us because this balances our room space a little better since we have pretty large classes. So I make this seating chart based on my largest class, and then that way I just fill it in the rest of the day. So my room stays set up in this setup. The numbers on the stands also correspond to the binder number. So like where it says violin 1, number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, but going back, that's also where that binder would be. So it kind of gives you an idea also of how we sort our binders and so forth. Here's another free seating chart you can get online. Just print that off and you can write in the kids' names in the bubble. So lots of things. You could use that randomizer and then use this free one and print it off. Every room layout's a little different though, and so that's why I liked making my own, because this is what fits in my space and my classroom. So there's a lot of options out there to test out and maybe experiment with some different seating charts. So I'm really interested to hear your experience. Particularly, I mean, we all have written recommendation letters, but I would love to know your experience with that, how you manage your after-school activities. Some of you do so many cool things. And then finally, how do you handle seating and auditions and the competition in your program? Because that varies so often in our community. So hop on to our community website and in our discussion posts and let us know what you're up to. So hope to hear from you soon. Have a wonderful day.